So another question I get a lot is, why would somebody let their home go to auction, especially over such small amounts of money? Well, one of them is the example I gave earlier, where that property is actually a liability to them, not an asset, and they know there's some underlying problem, and they want you to take it off their hands. But also we see loss of job. People lose their job. They just can't afford to pay their taxes anymore. They bury their head in the sand. Next thing you know, their home's going up on the auction block. Death. And I mentioned this yesterday. If I inherit a property, and once again, I don't want anybody to die just so they can leave me a property. But if they do die, please do leave me your properties. But for other people, acquiring a property when somebody dies is quite often, once again, it's a liability to them because they don't know how to deal with it. Maybe they acquired a property and needs some work and they don't have the money to fix it. And all of a sudden they're getting this property tax bill saying, hey, you owe us X amount of dollars for property taxes. They're saying, I didn't want this property. Why did I get stuck with this property? So for some people, they see it as a negative because they don't have the information to turn it into an asset. So quite often we'll see properties where it got inherited by somebody and they just ignored it. Divorce. Quite often we see the husband says, oh, I'm not paying the property taxes. And the wife says, I'm not paying the property taxes. Next thing you know, on the auction block. Quite often, you have to keep in mind, if they're not paying their property taxes, quite often they haven't paid their mortgage, or the mortgage may be worth more than the home is worth. And so they just have given up. If they're not making their mortgage payment, why would you pay your property taxes? Doesn't make sense. And then in extreme cases, sometimes they just didn't update their info with the county. And a really good example of that is Wayne Huizenga. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Wayne Huizenga, but he has a record for having the most Fortune 500 companies. He started Blockbuster. He did the Waste Management Company. He he's now deceased. He owned a whole bunch of sports franchises like the Florida Marlins. Anyway, if you've ever been to Fort Lauderdale and taken that water taxi that goes around all those beautiful homes, he owns a lot of homes along that waterway. And he also had a nice big piece of land at one point along that waterway worth around $1 million. And he switched offices. And when he did that, he had his assistant send out a letter to the county saying, hey, we've moved offices. And she did that for all of the properties, except she forgot about the vacant piece of land. And to make a long story short, this vacant piece of land ended up going up on the auction block and sold for around $60,000. It was worth, they estimate a little bit over $1 million. So somebody actually picked up this piece of land worth over $1 million for 60 grand because of a minor clerical error. And then Wayne basically tried to fight it. And he goes, well, don't you know who he did the don't you know who I am card. And then he said, well, we updated with all the other ones, but the county did exactly what they were supposed to do. They sent notice of tax to the addresses they had on record. And they did exactly what they were supposed to do. And Wayne unfortunately lost that legal battle and he lost that property. And some really lucky investor probably made a nice big paycheck on that. So these are some of the reasons, just a few of them, why a home might go to auction. And we see all kinds of, there's so many backstories as to why those homes make it there. So I want to talk about Texas for a minute though, because that has been my favorite place to do this particular strategy. Texas is booming right now because everybody from California seems to be moving there, along with Idaho and Phoenix and Vegas. But a lot of them are going to Texas because they hate the state income tax they have in California. And when people hate something, they usually want the exact opposite. So I grew up in snow all my life, so I am at the exact opposite. I am at the beach. I don't want to see snow. I love the mountains still, but I only like them when there's no snow on them or I'm really far away from them. So people always want the opposite of what they got. And if you live in California, the opposite of what you've got is Texas. So it is booming. Lots of people are moving there, specifically within this triangle. Now, if you look at the top of the triangle, that's Dallas-Fort Worth. Bottom left is San Antonio and Austin, and bottom right is Houston. And that's called the Texaplex. And within that triangle, that's where the vast majority of people are moving to. And Texas is a massive state with a population pretty close to the population of all of Canada, for my Canadians on here. But most people live within that triangle. And if I was going to go do tax deed auctions or most other investing, I would do it within that triangle. That's where you're going to see the most growth over the next little bit, and where you're going to see the biggest appreciation. And a lot of people moving there, which is going to drive up rent prices, which is good because one of the other things you need to know about Texas is because they have no state income tax, where do they make up for it? they make up for it on their property taxes. And that's why we see a lot of people in trouble and their homes go to the auction, because the property taxes in Texas tend to be around 2.6 to 3% of the property value. So if you get a year or 2 or 3 behind, that can add up pretty quickly. And next thing you know, these people can't get caught up and their home ends up on the auction block. So to me, Texas is the best of both worlds. If I was kind of interested in liens, but I also thought deed sounds really cool, well, Texas is a perfect hybrid. And let me explain that here. So as I mentioned before, in a deed state, when you get that property, you own it. It's end of discussion, you own it, do whatever you want. In Texas, they do things a little differently. In Texas, they do a lot of things differently, but when it comes to tax deeds, what they do differently is they actually give that homeowner one more chance. Even though you just bought the property, that homeowner can come back and they have a redemption period, just like with a tax lien. That redemption period is 6 months long. And in that 6-month period, they can come back, even if they come back 1 day later after you bought it. If they want to buy it back from you and redeem it, they have to give you a 25% premium. So if you paid $10,000 for a property, they have to give you $12,500 for that property. By the way, if you did any what's called eligible repairs, if you put any eligible expenses into it, you're also going to make 25% on that. So if the roof is leaking and that's $10,000, they're going to have to pay you $12,500 because you did the roof. Now, I want to caution you, don't buy a home and think, oh, I really want to make sure I make as much as I can off that 25%. So I'm going to go put in a $100,000 chandelier, because that's not an eligible expense. It has to be something to make the home safe, livable, prevent it from further damage, etc. And you want to prove that. So if you do the strategy and you're going to start fixing things, document everything that you did, take lots of before pictures, keep every receipt, get opinions from experts saying, yeah, the roof needs to be done. Have this all documented so that if it ever went to court, you could show that this was all eligible and therefore you're going to get 25% on it. So don't be doing all these extra cosmetic things till a 6-month redemption period ends, or you may actually lose money on some of the things that you do. But there's really only 2 outcomes that can happen. And one is you either get that 25%, or the other option is you own that property free and clear. And by the way, when you buy a tax deed, all the other liens, for the most part, disappear. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, they disappear. So if there was a mortgage on there, gone. Second mortgage, gone. Most liens will disappear off of that property. So here's an example of a property. This is from way back. This property sold at the auction for $15,300. It was a 3-bedroom home in pretty good shape, needed a few repairs here and there, nothing major. After repair value was around $80,000. Already had a tenant in place paying $900. So you can do the math and divide 900 into 15,300 and see that you're going to get your capital back pretty quickly. It doesn't take long, making it a pretty darn good return on investment. But I want to teach you some different, a lot of people, they see that and they think, well, the only option is I buy it and then I fix it and then I flip it. Well, that's definitely one of the options, but I want to just give you, I kind of want to get those creative juices in your brain flowing a little bit and just show you some different things that most people often don't think about. And buying and selling it as is. I think I mentioned it yesterday. A lot of people, handymen, they love to build sweat equity. They want fixer-uppers. They want it. The worse the condition, the happier they're going to be. They're actually looking to create work for themselves. I think it's weird, but there's people like that. You can buy fix and flip. That's the obvious one. You could buy a rent and hold. And like we said, $900 a month, you get that $15K back pretty quick. Here's one that most people don't know about, and I want to teach you this. It's called vendor financing. And so for those of you who don't know, you're going to become the bank. Now, what that means is you just paid, let's just call it $15,000 for ease of numbers. Now, imagine you went and put an ad on Craigslist saying home for sale, no qualifying. That means that the people who buy it don't have to go to the bank to get approved. So it's great for entrepreneurs and business owners. It's great for people that maybe have bruised credit. And so you put an ad in the paper saying $15,000 down, no qualifying, vendor will finance you. What that means is you're going to become the bank. Now, if that property was worth $90,000 or $80,000, if you take $15,000 down and you want to sell it for $80,000, you're going to loan them $65,000. Does that make sense? $65,000 loan plus $15,000 payment adds up to $80,000, which is the purchase price. So these people are now going to make monthly installments to you, and you've got your $15,000 back in your pocket. So you can go back to the next auction, buy another property. but now you've got this monthly paycheck coming in. They're going to pay you just as if you were the bank. Every month they've got to pay you on that $65,000 loan, and you get to negotiate what that interest rate looks like. The really cool thing is that when you do this, you've now created, out of nowhere, you just created a $65,000 receivable for yourself that you didn't have before. You've got some passive income coming in. You have every single dime that you started with back in your pocket. So you go back to the auction, and what do? Rinse and repeat. Do that over and over and over and over again. If you do that 10 times and you're getting $65,000 mortgages each time, you've now invented $650,000 in receivables for doing not that much work. So that's another strategy. Another strategy that I didn't put on here is the BRRRR strategy. And we've kind of alluded to it. We didn't really go in detail. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail now. So let's go back to this picture here. So imagine it's worth $80,000. And as I mentioned yesterday, there's sometimes what's called a seasoning period, meaning you might not be able to buy the home and the next day go to the bank and say, hey, I want to do an equity takeout on it. But at some point down the road, the banks will allow you to do an equity takeout based on the value of the property, not based on what you paid for it. So what that means is, imagine the banks quite often will do, let's say 80% what's called LTV, loan to value. So loan you 80% of the value of the home. So 80% of 80,000 is 64,000 bucks. So now the bank gives you 64,000. Now you have to pay, I don't want you to think that's free money. You still have to pay it back. But now you have $64,000. You started with 15, you now have $64,000. That's a non-taxable transaction, by the way. Borrowing money from the bank, you don't pay tax on that. So you now have 4 times the amount of money to play with. Now you go buy 4 homes and rinse and repeat. When you see people with really big portfolios of properties, a lot of them are doing the BRRRR strategy. They're buying, the BRRRR stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. So you're gonna do it over and over and over again. And so you're gonna pull cash out. You're gonna have, like I said, you are gonna have a monthly payment, but you're gonna put a tenant in there who's gonna make that monthly payment for you anyways. And anything over and above that you get, over and above what your payments are, you get to keep, and that's cash flow. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can take these properties that you're not paying very much for, monetize them, and because you keep getting your money back, whether you're doing the BRRRR strategy or whether you're doing vendor financing or whether you're just selling it as is or you're fixing it and selling it, in every case, you're walking away, if you do it properly, with more money than what you started with and the ability to repeat what you've already done. And so I hope you guys are seeing the power of this. I know I'm going fast because I want to make sure that I cover as much as possible, but I also want to make sure you get it. So if there's anybody, I don't have my chat box open. So I'm going to take, if you have any questions right now, just hold on to them, and I'm going to do Q&A at the end of this for you to answer all your questions. But I just want you to know that there's a lot of possibilities besides just buying and fixing and flipping. All right, so remember, opening bid, the starting bid is what the back taxes are, plus there might be a little bit of legal fees. We see a lot of homes starting under 10,000 bucks. But once again, 2 things can happen. The homeowner pays you what you paid at the auction, plus 25% on what over and above what you paid for it, plus 25% over and above any eligible expenses within a 6-month period, or the property is 100% yours. Now, the thing I love about Texas is during that 6-month period, you can go and put a tenant in place and get some cash flow. You can go and start your renos. Once again, you probably only want to do things where they're necessary, but you can get started on your rehab on that property. And there's actually ways you can flip it, which is that's why we have a 4-day course, because I can't really go into all that now, but there are ways you can flip it during that 6-month period in some cases, not in every case, but in some cases you can do that. All right, so there is a list of properties that comes up every single month when there's no COVID. And I actually pulled this one right just on my lunch break. I literally pulled this property just to give you an example. Now, this is a pretty extreme case because it's a very expensive property with a very low opening bid. This is in Montgomery County, which is in a place called Magnolia, Texas. And you can see it says sale type, it says future sale. That's because the auction is closed. If the auction was actually open on the first Tuesday of next month, this home would go up for sale, and the opening bid would be starting at $13,286 on a property worth $331,000. Now, when I see these properties, there's a big list. By the way, if you want this list, go to Publicans don't do it now because I want you to pay attention to me, but later go to Publicans, PUBLICANS.com. And it's going to take you to another, it now goes to a lawyer's website. I think it's lgbs.com. In any case, if you do publicans.com, it's going to take you where you need to be. And that's where you're going to get the list. Now, this is just one list. This is just for the list that this takes you to is Texas and Pennsylvania. So this is a very small subset of all the properties that go up for sale every single month on the auction block. And a lot of people, they do the work, if they know what they're doing, or even if they don't know what they're doing, most people take that list and do some homework and figure out, hey, which ones do I want to bid on when the auction takes place? And they're missing out because I like to call this a trifecta of real estate. When I see that list, to me, that's a list of people that are having issues. These people are 3 to 4 weeks away from losing their home forever. And to me, that is, if there's ever somebody who's screaming for help and we're problem solvers, that's them. They are at the very end of that fuse of losing their home. And so I'm going to go for the pre-foreclosure first. And I told you earlier, I used to have a company called Foreclosure Fixers, and I would send out flyers to people that instead of saying we buy your homes for cash and we buy ugly homes and we pay cash and all the stuff that most people send, which is fine. If you send that, you send enough of them, you will get a response. It's a numbers game. But my stuff said Foreclosure Fixers, we can help stop the foreclosure. And by the way, you're all welcome to use that and get marketing materials to say that. But make sure that you can actually help people stop the foreclosure. Don't say that you can do that and then not have that as an option, please. But I would go and meet with these people. Back in the day, I would meet with them in person. Now, of course, I would have teams and I'd hire people to deal with a lot of this stuff. But back in those days, I would actually sit across the table from people that were just at the very, very tail end of ownership of their property. And two different types of people would contact me. Type one are sometimes bad things happen to good people. And I can't think of a time in history like right now where more good people are having troubles, not because of any fault of their own. It's not because they did anything wrong. It's just this pandemic obviously shut down a bunch of businesses. People are getting laid off. I don't need to tell you guys what's going on. You know what's going on. And there are so many people in trouble that never in their life missed a mortgage payment, never in their life were late on a credit card payment. And here they are now unemployed and couldn't make their payments. Now, some of those people, though, maybe they lost their job, but now they're working again. And they can afford their monthly payments again. They just don't have that lump sum. Maybe they got $10,000 or $20,000 behind on their payments. And so I would go and I would loan them the money and literally stop the foreclosure, and they would pay me back in installments. And Shelley Hagan earlier was talking about a quitclaim deed. So I would have them sign a quitclaim, basically saying that if you don't pay me, and I was very transparent about it, I didn't want to take their home. I legitimately wanted to save them. So, but I said, if you don't pay me, nobody in their right mind is going to loan you money when you're in arrears and you have your credit's horrible. Nobody else but me is going to loan you money, but I need to protect myself. So if you don't pay me, I don't want to have to go through the foreclosure process. So another use of the quitclaim paperwork is to have people forego foreclosure if you have to go through the process of trying to get your money back. So I make them sign that, and I'm happy to say not once did I ever have to take back a property. Everybody who promised to pay me did pay me. So that's type one type of person. Now, as I mentioned, there's two types. The second type of person are people that tend to live beyond their means. And a lot of people have a way bigger house than what they can really afford. And they have all the fancy toys and the fancy cars. And it's great if you can afford it, but there's people that can't. And they don't need to wait for a pandemic to happen for them to run into financial trouble. People like that, you never want to loan money to because they will burn through it. You're giving them a Band-Aid and you're never going to see that money again. And so you need to have other solutions for them. And what I would typically do is I would give them what I call a soft landing. Now, by soft landing, what I mean by that, if you're sitting across from somebody who is so desperate, they are so close to losing their home, it'd be very tempting to go and get the home run and just give them the lowest lowball offer you can possibly come up with and get the property from them because they've got really no alternatives. But instead, what I would do is I would actually give the money, make sure they had a damage deposit, made sure they had several months rent, money for food. Quite often, I'd even put them in one of my other properties that was more affordable for them. Sometimes I do a rent to own, get them back in the game. But I'd always make sure I left them in a good spot because A lot of people, when they're at this stage in the game, their only option is either go find a relative or friend that's going to let them sleep on the sofa, or literally they become homeless. And that makes me really sad to see that, especially like I said, a lot of times these people meant well. Sometimes they live a little bit beyond their means, but they didn't. Anyway, when the times get really tough, even if before they were able to kind of scrounge enough to keep going, they'd be in a really, really bad spot if they lost their home and were on the street. So I'd always take care of them, put them in a as good a spot as I could, and still obviously make some profit for myself. But then what I found is, well, guess what? If that person just lost their job, they probably work with 10 other people that lost their job, and they would send their friends to me. And then sometimes their lenders would call me up, especially if it was a private lender, and say, Mike, I like what you did to save my mortgage on this property. I've got 20 other people in the same boat. Can I refer them to you? And that business took off like crazy with very little. After a while, I stopped sending out the flyers. I got way too busy, and just from referrals and word of mouth. And so anyway, you can do this too. Everything that I'm telling you that I did, you can absolutely do. And if you don't have the money, if you say, well, I can't be a lender, well, guess what? You could wholesale the property to somebody else. You could borrow money and lend it out at a higher interest rate. There's lots of different ways to do this that don't require capital of your own. So that is the first part of the trifecta, is going after the pre-foreclosure, finding lists like this of people in trouble and coming up with solutions that always, like I said, win-win. Now, I don't want you to be a martyr. I don't want you to go help people and lose so they can win. We don't want that either. We want you to win and them to win. And if you can create that, you're going to have a very healthy, profitable career. So number two is what most people do. They look at the list, they go to the auction. Awesome, we can't help everybody, but guess what? In this case, we're actually helping the county. We're helping the county, like I said, with their police, their schools, and they need this money. The other thing is, if sometimes you're going to get the property at the auction, most of the time they're vacant, but sometimes you're going to find the previous homeowner there. And if you want, you can certainly help them stay in the home. You can work out some sort of plan for them to either get back into ownership somehow or be a renter, or there's lots of different ways to play with that if you want to try to help the previous homeowner. In most cases, they're gone though. And then the third thing is called overages. And this is a very misunderstood, very unknown strategy, even to very sophisticated investors. Very few people know about this. Matter of fact, I didn't even know about this till not that many years ago. And what an overage is, when these homes go for auction, if the opening bid is $5,000 and the home sells for $50,000, the first $5,000, that belongs to the county fair and square. The additional $45,000, that actually belongs to the previous homeowner. And most of the previous homeowners have no clue that this money is owed to them. And the county there's a, what do they call that? A certain amount of time. I know there's a legal term for it. Anyway, there's a certain amount of time that the people have to go collect that money. Statute of limitations, that's what I'm looking for. If it goes beyond the statute of limitations, the county gets to keep this in their slush fund and do whatever they want with it. So the county doesn't really have a lot of motivation in many cases to track down the homeowner and get them this money. And so a really cool strategy that any of you can do is go track down that homeowner and say, listen, I know somebody who owes you $45,000. If you're willing to split it with me, and that split, it's whatever you two agree upon. You can charge 10%, 20, 30, 40. One of my friends who only does overages for a living, she charges 40%. And it's a great win-win though, because these people, imagine you just lost your home. If the opening bid was $5,000, you just lost your home over $5,000. And $45,000 makes a world of difference to somebody in that position. And if you can track them down and let them know that somebody owes them this money and you do all the work to get it for them, that is a great win for them. It's a great win for you. And most importantly, this strategy requires almost no money. You can go and get the list in most cases for free. Sometimes you can find these people on social media, or the neighbors know how to find them. Other times you might have to hire what's called a skip tracer. They're kind of like detectives that find people. And I'm sure if these people found out that you were trying to get them money, they'd be very happy to be found. So, but this strategy requires very little cash, and it's a great win for everybody involved. And it's just this trifecta to me is really one of the things that I'd be focusing on as these auctions start to open up, because they're gonna start producing lists. And if you can have 3 different profit centers from one list, to me, that is awesome.